what's it called? I'll send the link to you.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you, ma'am. Smooth 98.1, love music, love life. One wish that came from Gilead. I wonder what your wish is this morning. Most likely you're wishing that you could connect back to that friend that you've lost contact with. And let me quickly take some messages before we delve into the conversation in the soul food segment. This one is coming from Onyeka. He says, "Hi, Oluwaseun, I trust you're doing well. I'd like to reconnect, if possible, with a very old friend of mine. We met while we were both patients at National Orthopedic Hospital, Igbobi. Her name is Jumoke. Can't remember her surname anymore. Her dad worked with LASMA at that time. This was around 2002. This is coming from Onyeka. So please, if you know anybody that happens to be a friend or maybe a family member with Jumoke, who was in Igbobi at 2002 thereabouts, please reach out to us and we will connect you to Onyeka so that, you can just go back to having that lovely friendship with her. I have one from Charles Chidozie. He says, "I want to send a shout out to my friend, Gabriel Okemena Usie. He was the guy who gave me the first book I read from page 1 to the end in 2007. Things That Men Do." I know that book by James Hadley Chase, and that triggered my interest in reading a whole lot of novels. I've moved on from the company, but he's still there. Coincidentally, I called him 2 days ago just to know how he was doing. I appreciate that he borrowed me his books, and that has, to some extent, made me a better person. All right, so if you're listening, Gabriel Okemina Usie, Charles Chidozie is saying a big shout out to you for making him a better person by, helping him to start up or inculcate that reading culture. So yes, that's it. And that's all I can take in this hour. Thank you so much for being a part of the segment. I very much appreciate it. And please do not forget, if you've been listening and you know somebody who knows anybody who's trying to reach out to the persons they're trying to reach out, please do send us a message, 0809-444-0981, and we'll just make that connection happen. And to everybody, I really wish you the best, and I hope that you get back in contact with that person you're trying to reach. Now, it's 8 o'clock, actually, 1 minute past 8 o'clock, which means we're in the soul food segment, and we are about to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. I have my guests already joining me via Zoom. If you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, you already can see our faces. If you're not, I think now is a good time to fix that situation. So go to YouTube, search for Smooth 91 FM Lagos, and tap on the subscribe button. Afterwards, tap on the notification bell so that you are aware anytime we go live. My guest is Dr. Adetunmbi Omobola. She's a founder of Psych Wellness, and she's a consultant psychiatrist. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I am very well. Thank you so much. Your smile is brightening my morning already. So thank you.
I'm glad.
It's a pleasure. I mean, always, every time I have a guest come through very early this Saturday, everybody should be in bed. Everybody's chilling in bed, but then you join me. I always appreciate it. Thank you. So let's get right into the conversation. We'll be talking all about post-traumatic stress disorder, at least for the next 30 minutes thereabout. And in the middle of that, if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you have a clarification you're seeking, please feel free to do that. Send your WhatsApp message to 0809-444-0981. And then you can call in. The number to dial is 01-448-9981. So without further ado, let's start with the definition. I like to say, let's define whatever it is we're talking about in the layest way possible, so that somebody who has no understanding of medical terms whatsoever or jargons, or who has no idea, can understand what we're talking about. How would you define post-traumatic stress disorder?
Okay, thank you. In the simplest form, I will describe post-traumatic stress disorder as a disorder in which the body finds it difficult to recover after a stressful event. It's normal that everybody at a point in their life faces something that they consider difficult or stressful. But it's also expected that the body is able to recover after some time. But the failure of the body to recover from stress or from witnessing a traumatic event, it is what we call post-traumatic stress disorder. So that's the latest form to make sure our audience actually understand what we are talking about today.
Okay, let's go further in that last definition. How would you actually describe a traumatic event? I mean, what characterizes a traumatic event?
Okay, so trauma is any event, circumstance that occurs suddenly, either in its whole entirety or some part of it occurs suddenly, and you are not prepared for it, such that it now leads to either a loss of life, personally or to other people, loss of property, or a loss in one way or the other. So trauma is characterized by a loss happening to somebody or somebody close to us, and it's usually unexpected, unprepared for. So those are the characteristics of a traumatic event or a traumatic experience.
Just to be clear, you mean that every time, if you want to say trauma, if you want to define trauma, the person needs to experience a loss for it to be a traumatic event?
Yes, there's a loss. Now, losses can be varied. So when we talk about loss, you don't necessarily have to be somebody losing his or her life. It can be loss of finance, loss of prestige, loss of material things, loss of emotion, positive emotions. So there's usually a loss associated with trauma.
Yeah, I decided to ask for that because there are people who have gone through cases of physical assault, abused. And I'm like, okay, I can't associate that with loss. But then the way you've broken it down, well, yes, it does involve it. Yeah. So I think from that, we can already extract some of the causes of post-traumatic stress disorder. But then can you explicitly state some causes of PTSD? And then we can go further to some of the risk factors that can make a person, because I understand it's not everybody who goes through a traumatic event that actually comes down with PTSD. So let's start with the causes of PTSD.
Okay, so what would cause PTSD varies from individual to individual, just as you've said. Not everybody that undergoes a traumatic experience actually comes down with post-traumatic stress disorder. So the primary or the cardinal thing is experiencing a stressful event. So that is the primary thing that can lead to PTSD. So these traumatic events include things like physical abuse, sexual abuse, man-made disaster, famine, fire incidents, and all of that. So these either natural or man-made events are traumatic enough to cause post-traumatic stress disorder in certain types of people. Now, the severity also matters, because some people, you expect that a mild form of trauma shouldn't cause PTSD in them, but somehow they come down with the symptoms of PTSD from something another person will regard as a mild form of trauma or disaster. So all of this can cause PTSD in various forms in different kind of people. Now, other causes, aside those I've talked about, includes things like war, terrorism, even being a victim or watch other people suffer from all of these experiences can lead to post-traumatic stress disorder in other people. So a lot of environmental factors have been implicated in the cause of PTSD, both natural and man-made disasters.
Now moving over to the risk factor, and then you already mentioned while you were talking about some things that can increase the severity. What about family history of a mental health condition? Is it possible say maybe if there's already a case of depression in the family, which I understand can be genetically passed on, right?
Yeah, so these are vulnerable factors, things that make an individual come down with PTSD as opposed to another person. So a family issue of a mental illness of whatever kind, be it anxiety disorder, depression, substance use problems, all of this can act as a predisposing factor, something that makes it easier for someone to now succumb to the stress that he or she faces and then have PTSD. So those are biological vulnerabilities that is engraved in the genetic makeup of an individual. So the fact that individual A has some genetic markers that makes it easier for him or her to come down with PTSD increases the risk in him, as opposed to individual B, who does not have this biological vulnerability. So all of this also makes the difference in who comes down with PTSD as opposed to who do not come down with PTSD.
Okay, so we'll take a break because I think we need to very much clear this. I'm hearing something like that's a tongue twister. Vulnerability factors. We have risk factors, right? Things that, so we're separating them. So when we come back from that break, we're going to make it really clear, all the genetic and the biological markers and all of that, so that we're very clear about the possible causes. And then we move over to the symptoms, how you know a person is going through post-traumatic stress disorder. In case you're joining us for the first time, this is Breakfast in Bed. We are in the soul food segment, and the topic of conversation is post-traumatic stress disorder. That's PTSD. My guest is Dr. Adetunmbi Omobola, and my name is Oluwaseun. Please stay with us.
8.1. Don't go anywhere.
Listen closely. It's the sound of time, the sound of business.
Just a quick break.
We'll
be back afterwards.
And so does business.
Being an entrepreneur, you've got to be open to the world.
For daily and quick analysis on business headlines, tune in to Business Express on Smooth 98.1 as we track the big stories and walk you through the maze of business policies, how they contribute to the economy and affect your day-to-day financial affairs.
And I think that really did shape how I would see the world.
Time is business. Business Express on Smooth 98.1 every weekday morning from 6:30.
Smooth 98.1.
Hey, this is the genie for the smoothest jazz on the planet. Join me every Sunday from 12 noon to 4 p.m. on the Sunday Brunch, right here on Smooth 98.1. Get in on the Sunday Brunch, Sundays at 12 noon.
Press 1 for all your entertainment stories.
The box, the big stories. Spice up your day with some entertainment on the Smooth Breakfast Show.
One of the greatest, ain't no debate, no.
We've got your top trending stories from the entertainment scene on the front burner. It's movies, fashion, music, and everything in between. Tune in to The Grapevine and keep up with the Smooth Paparazzi as we bring you up to speed with the latest in the world of entertainment. It's all on The Grapevine every Tuesday and Thursday from 9 a.m.
Central for the best soul, R&B, jazz, and a bit of funk music. Keep it tuned in to Smooth 98.1.
I'll be.
You have to wait. In fact, please do not change the dial at any point. This is Smooth 98.1. I love music, love life. And my name is Oluwaseun. You're tuning into Breakfast in Bed here on Smooth 98.1. And the topic of conversation in this segment, which is a soul food segment, is post-traumatic stress disorder. And my guest is Dr. Adetunmbi Omobola. Thank you again for being my guest this morning. So before we went on that break, we were trying to, or rather, I was trying to separate the differences between the risk factor, the factors that exacerbate this thing, and the vulnerabilities. So please help me to clear that up before we move forward.
Okay. So when I was talking about biological vulnerabilities, So
Yes.
these are factors that is ingrained in the makeup of an individual. Those are things that are within that make you or I what we are. So those are factors that, if it is present, makes it even much easier to develop PTSD. So we are talking about things like biological things, like having a small intracranial volume, brain volume. So people that have smaller brain volumes, for example, has been linked to having an increased risk of having post-traumatic stress disorder.
Wow.
Yeah, so things like having a low intellectual quotient, people that have low IQ, especially children or young people who have low IQ, have more or increased risk of even developing PTSD. So these are factors that are part of who that person is. So when they are there, they further increases the chances that this person would have PTSD if he or she is subjected to the kind of stress that another person who do not have all of this would also be subjected to and would not have PTSD. So those are the biological vulnerabilities. Now, talking about the risk factors. So these are like environmental or external things that once they are there, the process of developing PTSD is like, will be set into motion. Now, people who have from a low socioeconomic background, for example, low socioeconomic background itself does not mean somebody would have PTSD, but it sets into motion the processes that could eventually cause that individual to have PTSD. People who have family history of physical abuse, who are repeatedly exposed to physical violence, either in childhood or in their young formative ages. Those are things that build up the chances of having PTSD when now faced with a traumatic experience. People who live in war-prone areas, people who have been subjected to famine and then chronic insecurity, chronic lack, all of those things are the factors that build up into developing PTSD.
Thank you so much. And while you just talked about people who are in war-prone area, reminds me of a study that I saw, and it was carried out, I think 2019, 2020 in Borno, Maiduguri area of Nigeria. And it was done on IDP, the internally displaced person. And turns out that the rate, or the people, they had about 1,200 respondents. 96% of those people had or are showing symptoms of PTSD. And that is so sad, because the truth is, a number of people in Nigeria actually take mental health cases lightly, and they do not exactly believe that it's a big thing. We're glad, that's why we're shining or beaming the light on this conversation, so that people know that mental health is very, very key. Like you'd say, and people in this field will say, there is no health without mental health. So now that we've talked about the causes, okay, let me quickly take a call before I go to the symptoms. Hello, good morning. Good morning, what's your name? Hello, good morning. Okay, what's your name? Good news, what would you like to say? What? Oh, no, it's 8:40. Come back in the 8:40 hour. That's when we have the kiddies show. But for now, we're talking about something else. 8:40, 40 minutes past 8 o'clock. Yeah, so please call back in that time. Thank you. Okay, yes, please. 8:40 is the time for the kiddies show. You can call back in that time. For now, we're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder. I already have a question from Kewe. He says, how does one know if he is experiencing stress, or let me see that, if he's going through stress? I just joined the discussion. So let's move over to the symptoms of PTSD, because I know it does not exactly share the same similarities, or it does not present the same way with the general form of stress. So what are those symptoms of PTSD?
Okay, so before I delving into the symptoms of PTSD, let's all know and let's establish the fact that everybody goes through stressful situations during the course of work, school, home living, and all of that. But it is expected, the body is equipped with mechanisms to recover after a stressful day or a stressful experience. But those individuals who have post-traumatic stress disorder are not able to recover. And then they have problems, symptoms in their body, they have problems functioning at work, functioning in school, and in other areas of their life. So what are the symptoms that you look out for, or people who have PTSD complain of? One is that they are highly hypervigilant. They find it difficult to calm down. They are very restless. They are fidgety. Most times they find it difficult to stay at a point. To see them pacing up and down in the house. They cannot sit still. They have this racing tendencies. They want to move about. They also have problems like headache. They find it difficult to concentrate. And most importantly, they find it difficult sleeping because they are always having flashbacks, either of their thoughts or things that remind them of the stressful events they went through. So they find it difficult to sleep at night. They're having nightmares and they're bolting out of bed suddenly because they can't sleep after remembering or having a dream similar to the experience they had. So all of this caused a great, stress. It further stresses them up. Another group of symptoms that they have is that they have intrusive thoughts and images coming into their minds. They could just be sitting down and they have flashes of past events that they've had flashing into their faces, and then that distracts them. They're not able to follow up a task. They're not able to, finish a task at the end because they are constantly distracted. So because of all of this, they try to avoid anything that reminds them of the event that is stressing them out. For example, an individual that was assaulted, maybe on the way to work, and that has become a source of stress. The person avoids walking on that particular street or on that particular road. So anything that reminds them of that event, they want to avoid it as much as possible. A lot of people also have amnesia. They just have blanks in their memory of that event. So you see somebody that was assaulted and cannot remember not only the events, but also has sketchy memories of few days or few hours around that event and cannot remember. So you want the person to even recollect the events that is leading to distress. The person cannot remember entirely. So this gap in memory affects also their work because they find it difficult to do all the things they normally do before because there are gaps in their memory.
Before you go, I'll go ahead. Let me just clarify that. So the amnesia, is it self-induced? Is it like a coping mechanism, or it's just the body that did that thing on its own?
No, it's not self-induced. They just cannot remember.
Wow.
The body finds the memories of the stressful events too difficult. So it shuts out some in a bid to protect the mind from filtering in so much of this, stressful things. It shuts out areas that regulate memory. So it's a protective mechanism by the body. But this causes a lot of difficulty for the individual because you cannot remember the things that you would even want to remember. So these are the problems with PTSD. So a typical individual having PTSD, is very, very restless, finds it difficult to sleep, have headaches, have problems with memory, describes himself as being numb, emotionally numb, cannot, feel positive emotions like joy, happiness, and all of that. So it's just a very difficult and miserable feeling, if I could use that word, for somebody going through PTSD.
Now, let's talk a bit about an aspect that you're very much centered on, or you're very concerned about it, that's child's wellness, mental health. How, because we know that there are some of these traumatic events that actually happen in childhood. So how can you pinpoint the symptoms in children?
Okay, now a lot of people who have PTSD had their events or the stressful events either as a child or in their growing up ages. And things like sexual abuse, physical abuse, all of those most often times occurs in the early years. So you see a child going through PTSD, describing his or her symptoms in the best way he or she can, based on their developmental stage. You hear a child saying things like, people are entering my head. Things are entering my head, because that is the best way the child can actually explain the intrusive thoughts and images that he or she is feeling. But we will be able to tease out some of these problems, even using child-friendly apps, child-friendly games, pictures, and all of that to depict the mind of a child at that time. But children, a lot of people believe that children do not have the capacity to feel these emotions because they are children. But children also have PTSD. Children suffer from the emotional insult and the stress that they also face on a day-to-day basis. So children have a lot of difficulties, but it is easy for the professionals to tease out these problems in them and help them appropriately.
How then do you treat something you can't even get the person to express? And not just in terms of the children, because you just talked about the memories too that they can't seem to recollect. So how do you help a person, or how do you offer therapy to a person who just can't remember?
So the memory loss are sketchy. It's not like the person does not remember who he or she is or things like that. But when you get to the occurrence, those traumatic, painful things, then the person does not seem to remember, but we can make him remember by relaxation techniques and all of that, such that the person is relaxed enough to give out the information. There are a lot of techniques that we can use to cause like a remembrance of those things in such a way that it doesn't hurt the person. So it's the hurt that makes the person shut out on those memories. So, but when the person is relaxed enough, he's able to talk about some of this. And once you sense that, oh, you are getting to areas where this is causing too much stress, you can temporize and then revisit the issue later when the person is better relaxed or more able to give you that information.
Well, 30 minutes is certainly not enough to talk about this topic because it's so broad and huge. So I'm going to take some messages, and afterwards we just go into how this thing can be helped, even though we understand that individuals are different, but then general things that can be helpful. There is a message from Onyeka. He says, can relate totally to the examples the doctor is talking about. I had an accident in 2002, and till this day, I can't remember what happened before the accident. All I know about the incident is what passers-by told me about it. No matter how hard I think about it, I can't remember at all. Then I have another one from Tony. He says, good morning, Oluwaseun. I always hear of PTSD. This is my major problem. Mine is worse. It has affected my feelings so bad, and it started from my teenage days because of the experiences I had. I don't have feelings for real. I need help. So, how do you manage PTSD?
Okay, so the management of PTSD is multifaceted. It requires a lot of mental health professionals. It requires time. But looking at our realities in Nigeria, for example, now, I'll say the management of PTSD starts from prevention. We can prevent a lot of people experiencing some of these stressful events if all the necessary agencies come to play. Now, there are areas where there are flood alerts, there are a lot of natural disasters that can be prevented, or at least the impact on people can be reduced. So Management of PTSD starts by preventing people getting exposed to some of this traumatic event that we can control. Things like famine, things like flooding. We can relocate people from flood-prone areas to safer areas so that they don't get, exposed to this. We can better educate people on the need not to build their houses on areas that have been demarcated as flood-prone areas or things like that. So this can reduce the risk. We can better educate families on the impact physical violence has on the growing mind of a child. We can further help on preventing sexual abuse, educating the children, even from the home in schools, so that all of this, the exposure will be reduced to the barest minimum. Now, for those that have been exposed one way or the other, we need to also give our support on the family level, community level, religious group level. The initial phase or the initial period when a stressful event happens, when we get enough support, be it social, financial, home relocation, all of those things, it goes a long way into preventing severe forms of PTSD. Now, for those that now have established PTSD, there are mental health institutions that can provide help, therapies, medication, if need be, to help people deal better with the symptoms of PTSD. So PTSD, yes, is a complex illness, but there's help available for those that are having these experiences so that they can live a normal life, they can be functional, they can be productive, and then despite whatever stress, they can move on with their life.
Well, I can tell you for a fact that we have at least 5 people who are experiencing symptoms of PTSD listening to you. So what will you say to them?
Okay, well, I'll tell them I quite empathize with them. I know what they are feeling. I have an idea of what they are going through, but there's help available. You just need to know that you are one step away from getting all of this behind you. Get to a mental health professional where you can get the help you need, and then you can take back the control over your life. And I'm sure you'll be fine after doing that.
So how can they seek out the help that they need?
Okay, so there are a lot of, don't let me say a lot. There are mental health institutions all around. In Lagos, for example, I work with the Federal Neuropsychiatric Hospital. They can get the kind of help they need in that kind of institution.
Okay, so if people want to reach out to you, how can they do that? Or they just want to ask you for further information and how to go about the process, really?
Well, if you want to reach out to me on social media, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Psych Wellness NG. Basically, you can reach out to me through that medium, Psych Wellness NG on Instagram.
Okay. The truth is, it's a very mental health. The topic of mental health is something that I want us to keep talking about it because it is very complex, like you mentioned. But talking about PTSD, can a person go back to having their former quality of life before that incident happened?
Yes, definitely yes. So but there are a lot of factors that makes it easier to get back. Early diagnosis is the key. If immediately after the traumatic event, and that was why I was talking about the support that is on ground, even before a traumatic event happens. Is there any structure on ground to help those that go through these things? There are incidents of children who are kidnapped and then released back. What is the plan to help these children in the immediate release period? So if the diagnosis is made on time and help is gotten on time, definitely the person can get back to living his or her normal life and have a good quality of life despite having this condition.
I certainly want us to have a part 2 of this conversation because I feel like we've not even scratched the surface. I mean, I was going through a study.
There's so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about.
And that study was done on women who went through postpartum depression. A number of them did have PTSD from giving birth, from the whole childbirth process till recovery. And that was just I don't know how to describe it. It's just so painful that something they can't really help, you know. And then you have some people just saying, "This is not childbirth. You went through it now. Some people went through it. My grandmother gave birth and nothing happened." And it's just unfair, really.
And to buttress what you just said, I think we need to start normalizing talking about mental health. We are all different. Our genetic makeup is different. A lot of women will not even come out to tell you that, oh, they had a traumatic birth experience, because everybody in their families, they have, babies, and there are no stories about it. But the more we talk about it, it gives people the confidence to come out and say, oh, my story is a bit different. What can be done about it? How can I seek help? Childbirth is traumatic. It might be easier for some people compared to other people. But for those that had a difficult birth, I think we should give them the opportunity to talk about it and get healing, even from talking about it. So we need to start normalizing conversations about mental health. We need to start talking about giving people a chance to come forward and talk about their experiences without being shamed or without labeling them as being different or being weak.
Even the conception process itself, there are some people who go through hell, literally, to have babies, IVF and all of that. And in the middle of it, they lose the baby. So how much more the whole delivery process? I mean, one thing I always say is just be kind. It doesn't cost, doesn't cost too much. Be kind to somebody. You have no idea what they're passing through, what they're going through, how they're processing grief, whatever it is. Just be kind, right? Yeah. Well, on that note, I will book my appointment with you for another session, because we need to continue this talk on mental health. And then we hopefully somebody who's out there will receive help and enlightenment. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the show this morning. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It's been a pleasure being here.
Thank you. I'll definitely stay in touch. Do have a lovely morning. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
All right, Lagos, that's it in this hour. Thank you again for being a part of the show. I very much appreciate your comments. Thank you very much, Frank, and every other person who sent in their messages. So if you have missed out this conversation, it's right on YouTube. After we're done, I'll actually post it on our WhatsApp status so that you get to go back and catch up on the conversation. And please share. And if you did not remember anything at all from this conversation, just remember this. Please be kind. Be very kind to somebody. They need it. Even you need that kindness, because positive emotions are contagious. Whatever you give, you'll get it back one way or the other. So coming up later on in, say, 4 minutes or 5 minutes time will be the time for the Kiddies show. I know you're waiting for that. I am too. I'm ready with my questions and the things that you'll spell. So please tell your kids, your nephews, your nieces to come around in the 8:40, just on the 8:40 mark, and it will be time for Curious Kids. This is Breakfast in Bed on Smooth 98.1.
Just music, it's smooth music.
Hey, this is Frank McComb, and you're listening to Nigeria's #1 station.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. I very much appreciate. Thank you, everybody on YouTube. Catch you later. Later.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your show. Bye.
Yes, bye-bye.